Hello, welcome to the Jann Arden podcast and show. Very special guest here today. You heard me speak about the Icelandic Writers Retreat. A little caveat here. The hilarious part of this was that I was asked by Eliza Reid to go as one of the faculty members. Don't start laughing quite yet. But I barely graduated from high school, as everyone is quite aware of. And but because I've penned a couple of books over the years, that she felt like it would be a nice fit for the retreat to go and teach, which was not what I did at all. I wouldn't say that I taught. I just hung out with some amazing people from all over the world, met some incredible people. The first night that we were there, we had a dinner, and I'm happy to say it was a vegan dinner, and which was very impressive. And Eliza took me aside and she said, I kind of did this for you. So I was like, Iceland's a little meat heavy. I'm going to tell you right now.
It really is.
You don't want to be a lamb in Iceland. You just don't. You don't. So anyway, we had this lovely dinner. And afterwards, what I was really, really nervous about was doing a reading. Thordis Elva read from a book called South of Forgiveness. So let me just, I want to just put this out here before anyone listens to this podcast, because there's just a bit of a disclaimer for today's conversation, as we're going to be touching on sexual assault in the show today, and it may be triggering for some people. And I just want to make sure if you've got kids or if it's something that makes you the least bit uncomfortable, just so you know what's coming. Trust me, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but this was definitely going to be something that we touch on. So I just wanted to say that ahead of time. So anyways, and to go back a little further, we are super excited to have a fellow writer, speaker, and activist who I did meet at the Iceland retreat with us today. So Thordis Elva, welcome. And maybe you can start by saying how you enjoyed the Icelandic Writers Retreat.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I thought it was a great experience. I had wild imposter syndrome going in, but it was a good experience. I was petrified. And I think that's how I knew it was right for me, that I had to do this.
That's surprising that someone like you would have like imposter syndrome. I find that hard to believe, but we hear that a lot with creative people.
Well, it was, it felt like a writer's retreat with like a capital W. And I haven't written a book in years, but I did write South of Forgiveness years ago. Still riding the wave of that. So yes, I did.
You've written a lot of plays. I mean, you're someone, if I was to launch into your, a bigger introduction for you, the amount of work that you've done in, all over the world dealing with sexual assault issues. And I mean, you've talked at the United Nations, you've spoken all over the world about different, you're doing a lot of different things, but all the plays that you've written, you have these things have won awards, and you were voted Woman of the Year in Iceland in 2015, which was because of the work that you were doing with gender equality, with sexual assaults. I mean, talk to me a little bit more about that, and then I do want to talk to you about your book and how. Because when you read from that book that night, that's when I beelined it up for you and just said, I've never fucking heard a story like this in my life. This is like so crazy. So maybe you can just back up a little bit to that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And had it been a gender equality retreat, I would not have had any imposter syndrome whatsoever. But yes, I have been very active within that area of gender equality and violence prevention, online and offline. I founded an organization a few years ago called the Nordic Digital Rights and Equality Foundation, because I feel that so many of these battles are being waged online these days. And it's come together in storytelling. I've tried to further these causes using, as you said, Jann, plays, books, short films, workshops, speeches. So yeah, my CV looks very odd. It's less of a job resume. It's more like a job scavenger hunt. Because it's been, many different places that it's taken me to. but I feel very fortunate to be working towards causes that I feel very passionately about.
I was talking about the night that we did a reading. I was ill prepared for it. Like, obviously, once again, I'm ill prepared because I didn't know we were doing a reading of any sort. So I was a little. But when you got up, and it's a book that you wrote several years ago called South of Forgiveness. I'm going to let you tell people what it's about. But you read an excerpt from this book, and it was about you preparing to go into an elevator. You were in Cape Town.
Yeah.
Because it was the midway point between Australia and Reykjavik, from where your assaulter lived and from where you lived. But the piece in the book was just, the place was so quiet and you just couldn't hear people take in a breath. You could hear like chairs creaking. It was eerie, but you spoke about, I'm actually going to get into this elevator after almost a decade and go down and meet the man that assaulted me for hours in a room when I was 16 years old. So that was just, I mean, the writing was beautiful. I don't know how anyone even writes to a story like that, but maybe tell us about the catalyst to writing South of Forgiveness and what prompted you to take a really daring, risky walk into an issue that still has so many people that are allies of misogyny, that don't believe victims, that, I mean, like you've spoken about in other interviews about people politicizing sexual assault. I mean, you ran the gamut with this book. It was a huge risk. So I just want you to speak to that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to have to take you back to when I was 16 and fell in love for the first time. And, all my girlfriends had fallen in love, and I was, I didn't see what they saw in boys with their primitive ways, their fucking spitting contests and like yanking on your bra strap. And like, yeah, it really didn't make sense to me until one day this beautiful, handsome, eloquent, soft-spoken honor student, Australian exchange student, walked in through the door of my high school and swept me off my feet. And what ensued was, I think, a fairly typical teenage romance. We were cringe in all the right ways, if you will. And then there was a school dance, and I had never been held in this gaze before, by a man. And I'd never felt like a woman before. It was all very new. And I was ready to kind of shed my childhood. So it felt only appropriate to also take another step into adulthood and try alcohol. And I had absolutely no experience being 16. And I thought the effect was instantaneous. So I'll just demonstrate. I thought it would be like, wait a second, I'd be drunk. And when that didn't happen, I was like, I was born to do this. I've got stamina. Yeah, I didn't have stamina. So 20 minutes later, I was just drifting in and out of consciousness in the bathroom.
Especially the first time.
Oh God, the first time.
Your
and that's where this story should end, right there. It should just be a story of my first night, like getting drunk and it being a bad experience. But it has a plot twist because Tom, my boyfriend, he came and scooped me off the floor and was a knight in shining armor and took me past a security guard that wanted to call an ambulance, saying, she's obviously dangerously sick. And he's like, I've got this. And I remember being so grateful that he could speak on my behalf because I was completely paralyzed. Like,
they thought you had alcohol poisoning, basically.
Yeah.
So he was cautioning your boyfriend to say, you need to take this woman to casualty or to the emergency ward.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It's probably some kind of central nervous system paralysis. But anyway, I was really grateful that he said no, because my dad worked at the hospital and I thought, I'll be fucking grounded for life. So I'd be in so much trouble. And again, this is where the story should end, where, my knight in shining armor, my first boyfriend, like, saved me from trouble for the first time in my life, where it's not my parents that saved me, But no, he took me home and I lived up on the bottom floor of our house, private entrance. So my parents are sleeping upstairs in the other end. And I'm so grateful, and I'm so frustrated with myself that I can't just say thank you. Uh, when he's like peeling off this vomit stained dress, and I was so relieved to be out of it. But then this gratitude, turned to horror as he proceeded to take all of my clothes off and rape me for 2 hours. And the reason why I know it was 2 hours is because how he positioned me on the bed. I couldn't move my head. And I was turned toward an alarm clock that glowed in the dark.
Oh, God.
And the things that people do to stay sane in traumatic situations, they will like latch onto anything that has an air of familiarity or normalcy. So I just stared at those blinking dots and I counted seconds to kind of get through the pain and betrayal of that moment. And ever since, I know that there are 7,200 seconds in 2 hours. But if we fast forward, then obviously our relationship, mine and Tom's, did not survive the events of that night. And we went our separate ways. It was never confronted. And
He
didn't.
broke up with you.
Yes, he did.
I read your book.
The next
and
day. Yeah.
when I got to that part, I shut the book several times just because I think the audacity was it was so frustrating, and it was so ridiculous
It makes
that he
sense in
broke up with you.
hindsight.
He broke
Yeah.
up with you.
I mean, he couldn't face his own guilt is
Yeah.
what was happening right there. Like he couldn't live with what he'd done. He knew, of course he knew.
Mhm.
But yeah, it took me a while. It took me a year or two to piece together that what had happened to me was sexual assault because it didn't fit the stereotype. It wasn't like anything I'd seen on TV. It wasn't like a knife wielding maniac jumping from behind a bush or like lurking in the back of my car. It was my soft-spoken, eloquent honor student boyfriend who had charmed my mother. And it happened in my bed. Like none of it made sense until it did. And by then he had completed his exchange program. He was on the other side of the planet. And by the way, Iceland and Australia are as far apart on the planet as possible. And this is before social media. Like I had no reason to think I would ever see him again.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is where the story could have ended. There are so many plot twists in this story. But I think if you get off on the wrong foot, like if you're started down a track when you fall in love for the first time and you're in your first relationships, I think you can, land in kind of a harmful trajectory. And I ended up being in relationships that weren't good for me. And 9 years go by and I try to push this out of my mind. But whenever I stand still, I'm counting seconds. Like I'm so marked by this experience. And I have like unhealthy relationships with people, with my body, with alcohol. And, something had to give. One day, I'm in a strained relationship. I'm having a fight. I like storm out the door, blinded by tears, get in my car, drive to this nearby cafe, sat down, like shaking. I was going to calm my nerves by doodling in a notebook, and out streams a letter that had clearly been brewing in my subconscious to Tom, confronting him about what had happened that night and how that was his responsibility. And I was done carrying the burden of blame and shame that had never belonged to me. And it shocked me. I did not see that coming. I had no idea that would happen. But the letter was so complete. It just sprung from my pen. And I thought, what do I do with this newfound voice of mine? Like, do I stick this in a drawer? Do I send it? Do I risk him calling me a liar and like, I don't know, re-traumatizing me? I don't know. It was a complex
So you did
set of emotions.
You did decide to send it.
I did.
You tracked down an address for him and you sent it. And then you
An
waited.
old Hotmail. An old Hotmail. Like nobody uses Hotmail anymore, right? I mean, the chances of him reading this I thought were minimal. And I had like prepared for a lot of outcomes. I'd prepared for silence, which I thought was the most likely outcome because people generally don't want to face up to the worst thing they've ever done.
Mhm.
Or, being called a liar,
Yeah.
having a negative response. But the only response I did not prepare for is the one that I got,
Which
which was just a hot-blooded confession. It's just an unwavering, I know what I did, and I can't express how incredibly sorry I am, and how not a day has gone by where it hasn't like flashed past in my mind, like in vivid accuracy. And it turned out that we had lived these parallel lives where he also had dysfunctional relationships with alcohol, people, his body. And it makes sense, as wild as that sounds, because we were both dealing with oceans of guilt. The only difference is that his guilt was justified, and it led to all these like harmful, destructive coping mechanisms. But mine was the kind of guilt that society bestows on victims. So I was carrying that type of guilt while he was carrying
And
the one that,
shame as well, I would
Mhm.
imagine. Like a
yeah,
lot of shame.
yeah.
So fast forward. I mean, there's so many things that I want to get to with you. It's you guys corresponded for the better part of a decade. I think it was 7 or 8 years. These
Yes.
letters went back and forth, this confessional. It was very much, finding out about each other's lives and what, why, who. And then you had decided at one point to say, we should meet. Was that you or was that Tom?
Yeah. So like that first email, when I got that from him, I stared at it and I thought, because it ended with the sentence, "Where to from here? Can I make this up to you?" And I thought, can you, that question still blows my mind. Like, can you make rape up to someone? And then I thought, there actually is something
Can I send you a
that
gift card to Starbucks? Like, would that do it?
right?
But that's what it sounds like. So trivial. What can I do? Do you guys,
Well, there is something. And I think any survivor will tell you the same thing. We do want something, and it is the answer to the $1,000,000 question of why.
why did you do it?
Why? Why did you do that to me? What about me made you feel justified in doing that to me? So that's the question I posed. And yes, it sparked a correspondence that lasted 8 years on and off.
That's unreal.
We had to just unpack. I mean, I was also like professionally fascinated. I mean, I'd worked in violence prevention by then, quite a few years. And I'd always wanted to know what motivates men, what motivates boys, what motivates men like him in particular, who are from stable backgrounds. He had loving parents, he had equal relationships modeled to him. He's from a country that's just oozing with privilege, and still he can do this. And if he can do this, like if he can tell me what motivations lay behind, then there's something in there that's really, really valuable in this type of work. If we are serious about wanting to combat sexual violence, then we're going to have to ask really difficult questions and have very uncomfortable conversations. But at the root of it is uprooting the types of attitudes that motivate men like Tom to do what he did. So yeah, there was excruciatingly difficult exchanges had there, but so valuable and ultimately very healing, actually.
And you did decide to meet in person.
Yes.
And that was a week. You went for a week and you kind of did, in the book, I just felt like I was walking along with you guys, and I felt very voyeuristic. I felt like I shouldn't be there. It was a beautifully written book, but you did a few touristy things. There was a lot of hard moments. There was finally a lot of tears. But he did, finally come forward and say, I want you to tell people, because he basically said, I felt entitled to your body.
Yeah, exactly. And he did say that as well in the TED Talk that we gave that accompanied.
Yeah. I
the
want to make
book.
sure we cover that because when you guys wrote the book together, and there's a fairly long, I mean, we don't have enough hours this week to cover this story off. It's so insane, but so important. But you guys ended up, South of Forgiveness does include journal excerpts from Tom, and it does include a really flushed out sense of beautiful dialogue between you two. And at the end of the book, you explain why the dialogue was so precise and why it rang so true, is that you would come home after these exhausting days of talking with him about a very heavy topic. You'd get into your room and you would write everything down and you would recall these conversations. So when you're reading the book, I didn't question that really ever because it just was so real. And of course, Tom is signing off on the things that you're writing. But you do this book together, it's in 14 different countries and languages, and it causes a lot of unseen, perhaps, responses. So Thordis and Tom Stranger wrote about two people coming together from very different angles of this horrible incident. And the fallout from that was extraordinarily difficult to really take in, wasn't it?
Yeah, you mean the global shitstorm? Is that what you're
I
talking
wasn't going to use global shitstorm, but we're calling this podcast Thordis Elva, the global
The global
shitstorm.
shitstorm. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, my name means thunder goddess. So global
I,
shitstorm is just the subtitle. No, I mean,
so
uh,
good.
I'm not fair though saying that because there was a
A lot of good,
lot of
yeah.
good. Yeah, many people were ready to receive this
Oh my
story.
God. I found it extraordinarily uplifting and healing and enlightening, and anything that's happened in my life, it made me realize this isn't mine to carry around, but we need women reminding each other of that all the time. But it did. I read in an interview that it was weaponized. The book was very politicized.
Mhm.
There was, a lot of stalkerish men that were inserting themselves into the assault, and coming after you on social media. And, there was a lot of news articles and stuff that did that. They couldn't understand that you were giving a rapist a voice. And so
Yeah.
women that you would think would be your allies were anything but. Like some of them, I'm saying a percentage of them, but that was there.
Right. Well, I want to speak to that because you're so right. And the giving a rapist a voice, I think, was the biggest like criticism that was wielded against me. And you know, okay, so this is happening in 2016. We're recording the TED Talk and it comes out in early 2017. And at the time, Trump had, it was his first time in office. And the tape where he's talking about grabbing women's pussies, like, had been leaked. And there's this rhetoric, there's this public discourse, that he, of course, authored with, the kind of sentiment being that, that's just locker room talk. And sexual violence is a normalized part of men's culture. And he minimized, he deflected, he, sidestepped responsibility. And
Did he
so
ever?
for,
And
did he
continues
ever,
to do
right?
so.
Exactly, 22 accusers later. But I just felt like it was, it was such a strange thing to have wielded against me that I was platforming a rapist. I was like, have you seen who's in the White House? What are you talking about? Like, if you think we're not already hearing and seeing rapists like in the public eye, then you're not living in the same world I am. Like, we are seeing them. They are, playing in our national test matches. They're directing our films. They're running entire countries, but they're not taking responsibility. And they're certainly not saying the right things. So that was, that was the mission that Tom and I were on, was to model that accountability that the world so desperately needed and still needs, to see someone take on the responsibility that is all too often, if not always, assigned to victims. So, yeah, the notion of me platforming a rapist, I think platforming a rapist could be the exact thing the world needs to see, depending on what the rapist is saying.
Mm-hmm.
And if the rapist in question is willing to shed light on what motivated his actions with the hope that it's going to deter others, with hope that it's going to reach the ears of men who desperately need to hear that they are never entitled to a woman's body and that consent has to be sought every time you're intimate with someone,
Yeah.
then
Well, you've taken so
I'd do
much.
it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that you've taken so much of everything you learned from the experience and all the angst and the disappointment, but kind of the triumph of literally crawling yourself out of really a lot of darkness to find answers for yourself. And you've gone on to write, 9 plays. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 2 projects that you did for children in elementary schools. I mean, these films aired nationally on Icelandic television to teach children about, I would imagine, consent, or, I mean, what was that? That obviously stemmed out of this experience with Tom, and the other experiences you had consequently to that, afterwards, like you said, just abusing alcohol, not having great relationships with people. So you obviously got to a point in your life where you resurrected yourself. I mean, you've spoken at the UN, at the Nordic Council. You've spoken at cyber violence conferences and safer internet forums. I mean, writing 9 plays, you've gone on to do so many things, and your work ethic is unbelievable. The stuff that you do, and it feels like you really are on a mission to not only bring awareness, but to really change rape culture globally. And that seems like such a big thing. And I've also heard you say in interviews that it should never be on one person to carry a whole cause. And that, it's a group effort, and that you were never comfortable in being the poster child for any of this stuff that was assigned to you. But do you feel like it's possible? I mean, hope is always there, but it's such a massive issue. There's such a polluted sense of, like you said, entitlement. Um, and I heard you say it to an interviewer. She asked you if do you think you're going to change the world? And you answered yes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
felt my heart beam, because you had so much resolve with it. And it stemmed, I always say, good things come out of bad things. I've always said that. And there's so many good things coming out of you from that bad thing.
Well, I do have that audacity that was actually the name of my workshop, The Audacity. No, actually, it was writing to change the world at
I love that.
the Iceland Writers Retreat. But yeah, I have been asked about that. Do you really think you can change the world? Because yes, you do seem like you're hell-bent on that mission. And my answer is yes. And actually, if you look at world history, then a small group of concerned citizens is in fact the only thing that has ever changed the world. And it starts with one, right? And so I can be that one person, and I just have to find like-minded people that believe in the same cause. And I've seen it change, Jann. I've seen it change over and over again. And the moments that move me the most is when I get to be present in the room and see it happen. I do a lot of public speaking, and I speak in colleges. And just to kind of bait the boys, I have Andrew Tate in the title of my workshop. Yeah, that catches their attention for sure. And so when I, enter the room, so many of them have decided to oppose me, to just be shut off from my message. And they'll chant sometimes. They'll be like, top G, which is like the Andrew Tate fan mantra. And then I take them through this lecture, and I have a workshop about, rape culture and online misogyny, and how it's actually so detrimental for boys themselves, and how it's actually like them, when wean themselves onto an ideology that makes them dysfunctional in a society where 50% of the people are women. They're going to lose out on so many opportunities in life, and it's ultimately harming their own humanity that they allow themselves to dehumanize women. But obviously it's 50 minutes, so I'm not doing it justice now. But the process, seeing them actually understanding and like the shoe drop for them is nothing short of remarkable, and it's so rewarding. And the times I've like stood afterwards in the hallway with boys that just were overcome, that just had that, light bulb moment, and are going through everything and questioning everything, is what I feel like changing the world must be, because it starts there. It starts within.
Oh, definitely.
And like we tend to think of it as collective movement. And yes, it is collective movement, but we can't overlook the fact that a collective movement is individuals at the end of the day.
Caitlin, any questions, please go.
I think, well, we have a case right now in Canada that is getting a lot of attention. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it at all, like, or if you've come across it in your work, but it's a woman. She's anonymous, but her initials are EM, and she's become very well known in Canada, especially for women. And this took place at a hockey tournament here in Ontario, and it's just, the details of it are heartbreaking. And we have a really fantastic reporter named Robin Doolittle who's been doing some amazing coverage. She was a past guest on the show. And I've been reading through the testimonies, and this, because they each have 5 separate lawyers, she's cross-examined 5 separate times, and she's having to go through this and defend herself so much. And it has understandably outraged so many people in Canada about how backwards the laws are, how statistically unlikely it is for, survivors of sexual assault to kind of come forward and go public with their accusations. And you can see now happening in real time exactly why. So I feel like when I'm going through this, I'm thinking to myself, how can I personally, but we, better support sexual assault survivors? And also, do you have, from your perspective, any advice for people who may be hearing this and have gone through an assault themselves?
Well, firstly, believe them. Believe survivors. First thing, be all and end all, essentially, for me. That's how we break the silence. That's how we break the cycle of violence, because violence thrives in silence. And survivors are not going to speak up if they're not believed. So holding that space is incredibly important. And, there's still, like, people are still afraid to pick sides, if you will. And they think that they can stay neutral, but you can't. You can't, in an issue like this, neutrality, you're siding with the oppressor. So that is also an important thing to keep in mind, that we're going to have to be brave in this matter. Like, neutrality is not an option, not with a pandemic like this, not with something that is evident and present in all the countries on the face of the planet. It is so systemic, it is so massive, and clearly it's cross religions and cross languages and cultures. Like, it's ingrained in a way. Like, patriarchy is so present, and we're so complicit in it, all of us, that I think it requires a lot of self-examination of like how we are upholding these structural oppressions and what our role in that is. And I think that's a lifelong journey. I mean, I'm still discovering how, where my biases lie, like where my limitations are. It's not something you ever really graduate from. But you did ask about my advice for survivors. First off, I think it's really important to state that my journey is not, a methodology. My story is not, something I'm recommending for other people to repeat after me. The only thing I recommend for survivors is to always put their own safety first. It can be dangerous to invite someone who's been abusive back into your life in any way, shape, or form. I could, kind of from the safe distance of the other side of the planet, do that. And also, I didn't engage with Tom until I was certain that he had not reoffended, that, he was not a serial rapist by any chance or means. But what helped me heal, I guess may sound strange, but it was kind of giving up the hope of a better past.
Mm.
The fact that I could stop running.
I love that.
The running from
Yeah.
my past was so taxing. Trying to disown this part of myself. And when I could finally kind of like stop all of it, stop counting seconds, stop the escapism, stop the workaholism, and just sit down and examine my pain from inside and not shy away from it, that's when the biggest leaps and bounds of healing took place. And I think it boils down to giving yourself that permission. But we're not going to lay all that responsibility on the shoulders of survivors alone. No. We have to create that society where that is permitted and encouraged. And we have to also empower survivors in going through their healing process on their own terms, that no two healing journeys look the same. And it doesn't have to result in forgiveness. Like, it doesn't have to have a certain destination. Like, the only thing that is important for someone who's been robbed of control is to feel like they're back in the driver's seat and that they're in control of their lives, and how they build themselves back up after something so devastating. So I would say that would be my main pieces of advice.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Stop hoping for a better, a different past, a better past. It's so true.
I think it's the hopeless romantic in me also. The notion that the first time I gave my heart away, it resulted in rape. Like, no one wants to grapple with that. Certainly not a teenage girl.
And the story sadly is not uncommon. I think we've all read statistically, so many of these assaults come from people that we know, people that are close to you, whether it's even a partner,
70%.
70%. 70%, you guys.
Yes.
And that is, the 30% that you don't know is still fucking god awful. But, to have 70% of people that you on some level trust, know, you're aware of. Anyhow, you've gone on to do so many things. I'm so interested in your plays. Are they all in Icelandic? Were the plays in English? Like, can you tell me a little bit about those?
Oh gosh. It's another thing I haven't done
It's a whole other thing. No, but I mean, obviously you had a time in your life where you were unbelievably, and I think you referred to it maybe as being a workaholic almost, that maybe that was a byproduct of trauma, a byproduct of wanting to do so much and tackle so many things. But are they in Icelandic or English? Or I'm just curious from a personal point of view.
They're in a few languages. Yeah, they're in a few languages. I think they're 9 by now.
God, that's incredible.
And they do touch upon, I'm just a hopeless social change maker. Like, I haven't written anything in my life, whether it's a play. Well, society doesn't change itself.
Listen, we don't need another fucking Hedda Gabler, okay? We don't need Hedda Gabler part 2.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Nobody needs to see Harvey ever again in their lives. Like, we just don't need to hear about an invisible bunny. One final thing, and I know we've kept you longer than we wanted to. I mean, just congratulations on everything you've done and continue to do. It's hard, standing up for people, and it's nerve-wracking speaking to, I would imagine, a room full of people at the UN or anywhere. You've done so much work with government on even policy making. I mean, how could you have imagined that 16-year-old girl in your parents' basement all those years ago, coming from a place of devastation and shame and physical hurt, and speaking to government policymakers on gender equality and reforms that need to be made with people, all with men in particular, and the rape culture. I mean, could you have imagined what you've gone on to do?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's a secret I thought I would take to my grave.
Wow.
Definitely very infected for many years.
That would have been so sad, Thordis.
Yeah. No, but
That
it
would have
is,
been.
it still blows my mind that, that journey from like thinking you'll be buried with the secret to having over 10 million people watch your TED talk about that thing. And to, it's a strange identity to be quote unquote famous for the worst thing that ever happened to me. And when people like look at me long, when I get long looks, like in airports or in stores, I'm never sure if people just like my hair or if they know the worst thing that's happened to me. It's a strange, strange life to be leading, but I feel so fortunate. I feel so privileged that I have been able to speak in rooms of power and that I do get to be the voice of survivors at the
It's
table
amazing.
in many instances, and I try to always rise to that occasion and treat it with the utmost respect and with in mind that I am just one person and I can't represent a cause or all survivors, but I can play my part in moving the needle and refusing to stay silent
I
and
know,
to
that's so
hold
important.
power, right? And to hold
Mhm.
like
It's so
power to
important.
account.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of people who go through traumatic events in their life are often in recovery and after it happens trying to look for kind of a light to guide them along this dark path that they find themselves. And I just think it's
Yeah.
such an impressive thing to dedicate yourself and your work to becoming hopefully that light for people who are on a dark path.
Definitely, Caitlin.
Yeah. I read a quote somewhere that said, you should try to become the person you needed when you were younger.
Yes.
And
Hallelujah.
I'm proud
Mhm.
to say that like I feel like I have succeeded in doing so because I know I would have needed to hear my story when I was younger. And I know it would have lessened the time that I was fucking around. It was 9 years of just fucking around and just suffering and torment that I could have been without had I known a straighter path
But you
to
know what you
healing.
know when you know it,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly, right?
And
Yes.
you're a mom of 3 children. You have twins. This is a whole other story. We can't get into today, folks. We're going to have Thordis come back because I know that you're just hopefully embarking on a new project. It's probably something you've been thinking about for some years. But you had an extraordinary birth of your twins. I mean, your older son, but then your husband and you went on to have these twins that had a 1% chance of survival, and you had doctors telling
Less
you
than one.
Oh my
less than
Less
gosh.
one.
than one.
For everyone listening, Thordis is showing us a tattoo she has on her forearm that has like the signs for less than 1%. That's amazing.
So less than 1%. And your beautiful children celebrated their 7th birthday on the 8th of May. And you had this story was another. I mean, this is such a juxtaposition to where your professional career kind of launched from, because it was also something you became very known for was the journey of your pregnancy, the delicacy.
Mm.
You were on your back for months and months. You literally atrophied trying to hold these little souls into your body and get them out. So you were basically like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. When the kids were finally born, you were literally in a ball, and the doctors once again were just like, lady, you did this to yourself, so figure it out. And but these kids have gone on to thrive. But you had an international community. I saw that you have a map that literally is from these little pins where people from all over the world were praying and doing chanting and doing different sacred stuff to pour the love into your body for these children, and they made it. And anyway, when you I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, because that is a triumph. And I hope you write that story, because that is incredible too. I got a chance to talk to you a little bit about your kids and how fucking wild it was. They were dying, literally dying on your chest, and then coming to life again, because you were telling me something about their brains when they're that preemie do not have the capacity to work cardio, breathing. They can't multitask like baby. Am I getting this completely wrong, aren't I?
No. They can't
Okay.
do those three things. They can't swallow and keep a steady heart rate and breathing. Like they can't do those three things at once. So they tend to die when they're nursing. Like I mean it, like they die, like they go into cardiac arrest.
Oh my gosh.
But you're right in saying juxtaposition, Jann, because, you know, I had this global shitstorm with South of Forgiveness that, you know, of course, again, 75% of the reception was beautiful,
Right.
but it's that loud, like group of haters that, you know, the stalkers and the threats and stuff, that really gets under your skin. And it's like, at the end of the day, what you remember, which is ridiculous because you should remember the praise, but you end up remembering like the ill will. But anyway, so, you know, getting all that wielded against me, and then being so vulnerable in this position where I'm fighting for my life, my literal life, and the life of my children. And it just, you know, this like global outpouring of love just being carried, you know, by people that prayed to different gods, that would write poetry for us, that would stick little notes in the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, that would climb Mount Everest and leave flags on top. Like the hope that people would conjure. And it made me realize that we may not all believe in the same God, but we all believe in miracles.
Well, it's an incredible story. I hope you write it down.
Yes,
I
I'm
hope
working on it. I
hope-
found my doula recently, the person I
Good.
think can help me birth the story. So I do have high hopes that
we all need one of those.
we do.
We need people. No, it's the truth. I mean, inspiration comes to us in times in our lives that are completely unexpected and unbelievable. And I believe in that. Sarah, I didn't even let you say anything, so I apologize. But it's been a pleasure talking to you. It was great meeting you at the retreat. I'm so glad that I went. And I don't think I taught anybody anything. But I did, however, meet some incredible people and was very inspired. And I think if you ever get a chance to go to that retreat, especially if you're a writer at any level in your life, whether you're a diarist or someone that writes a poem once a month for your grandmother, if you want to be inspired, you need to go. Thordis, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I wish you all the best. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thordis Elva has been our guest. And you know what? Sarah has just reminded me to make sure you come and see us on Patreon. It's like 40 cents a day.
I've
It's
never
not
done the
even
math
that.
daily, but
Can we do the math? What's $5 into 30? I think it costs you 16
I
cents.
graduated from radio school, so I got to pull out the calculator here,
Grade
but
5 was the best 4 years of my life. Anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast. We appreciate you. Go subscribe to us. You can find us very easily. We'll just appear in your mailboxes. You can leave us a review. I suggest 5 stars. I would probably suggest 6 stars. Oh, it's
17
16
cents a day. 17
Okay.
cents a day.
All right. Well, you've heard it here first, folks. We'll see you next time. We appreciate you listening. Don't forget to leave voice notes. We always like hearing from you. Even if it's terrible, even if it's something really mean about Sarah, we still want to hear from you. Even if it's something glowing about me, you know what? Forget me. I get the glow. Caitlin and Sarah need you. They need you to lift them up. We'll see you next time. Toodly-doo.